The deepening NHS crisis, crucial targets missed on waiting times and cancer treatments. The number of patients seen within 4 hours in A&E in England falls to the worst figure on record.
A&E performance is a result of systems under pressure, both in hospitals, community services, social care, GP services. The whole system's under pressure.
And a dying cancer patient's scathing verdict on the NHS as waits for treatment reach a record high. Also tonight, shameful calls for ministers to reverse plans to end a scheme to bring vulnerable young refugees to the UK. Smile for the camera, but reveal tonight who wasn't in the shot when Trump met Gove. And respect for Aretha. The soul legend announces plans to retire.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. The extent of the NHS winter crisis was underlined today with new figures showing A&E waiting times the worst on record. In December, England's hospitals missed their 4-hour treatment target again, and there were other worrying signs too. More days were lost to so-called bed blockers, and there were longer waits for urgent cancer referrals. The Prime Minister, meanwhile, said the NHS is treating more patients than ever and insists it is getting record funding. Sally Lockwood was allowed into Yeovil Hospital to see how staff and patients there are coping.
A&E departments are stretched like never before. Record waiting times and relentless pressure. Bed blocking is also at its highest levels, so patients waiting on trolleys in corridors has become a worrying new norm. It's consultants like John who work tirelessly to keep these departments afloat.
But we still have our times when we get close to running out of space, or we have to sort of brief episodes of time where we're actually overly full.
Though Yeovil District Hospital has performed well, even they're not immune to the pressure and problems.
The things that concern me most is just the ongoing rises in demand, the ongoing issues with recruitment and retention of staff, and making sure that we can provide good quality care 24 hours a day.
And what do you need?
We need a bigger space for the number of patients that we have, and I think we need to make sure that we are doing things differently going forwards.
And the national figures for England paint a very bleak picture. In December, just 86.2% of A&E patients were seen within 4 hours, the worst official figures on record and well below the target of 95%. For patients needing urgent cancer treatment last year, more than 25,000 waited longer than 2 months to be seen. That's the highest on record. And trolley waits for 2016 were up too. 2,500 waited more than 12 hours to be admitted, more than double the previous year. But for Frontline staff, there's a tough reality to these figures.
Over the holiday period, obviously, is challenging because our GP colleagues, aren't open like we are. But again, we've got our escalation process that we put in place.
The chief executive at Yeovil has had to introduce new ways of coping. To help with bed blocking, they now hire beds at a local care home. But long waiting times, he says, can't always be avoided.
Nobody wants people to wait longer than they really need to in an A&E department. We are very focused on that, but we're also make sure that patients are clinically treated in the best way and as quickly as possible. So it will mean sometimes that people do wait longer than 4 hours, but that sometimes is clinically appropriate.
NHS England says the vast majority of patients were still seen within 4 hours, but the prognosis going forward doesn't look good, with leaked data for January suggesting figures could be even worse.
Now, we've heard the terms breaking point and crisis to describe the NHS all too many times, but these figures really do reveal an NHS that has never been in such a bad state. All hospitals have winter pressure, but they usually use the summer months to clear their backlog of patients and prepare for the strains of winter. But last year there was no quiet spell, so they went into the winter months with services already stretched. And staff say they think this year will be no different.
Sally Lockwood in Yeovil, thank you. With urgent cancer referrals at a record high, the family of one patient who told ITV News she was let down. A tumour in the spine of Patricia Whitehouse was not diagnosed until it was too late. As Damon Green reports, before she died, the mother of two made a moving video describing how the NHS failed her.
When I got to see one of the doctors, he was asking me about the amount of time it had taken for me
to get in.
To get through A&E.
When Pat Whitehouse recorded this message, she knew she had just days to live, diagnosed with terminal cancer, but diagnosed, she believed, too late to save her.
They never sent me for an X-ray,
no.
a CAT scan or an MRI scan.
No.
She asked her brother to film these words as a warning to others.
Looking back now, I would say don't take no for an answer, no matter what. Do not take no for an answer. If only they'd done the likes of MRI scans and X-rays very early on, my sister would be alive now. I'm sure of that.
Pat said she first visited her GP last September, where her severe back pain was wrongly diagnosed as a urine infection. Just over a month later, she spent 9 hours in A&E, which resulted in her being sent home with painkillers. It wasn't until November, when Pat received an MRI scan at the insistence of her family, that she was diagnosed with 3 terminal tumours.
I was really struggling and I fell.
She suffered before she died, but her family insists it was her desire for people to see these moments.
Anybody that knows my sister or knew my sister would tell you how strong my sister was, with a will and the want to do things and make things better.
The chief executive of this hospital has offered her condolences to Pat's family and promised an immediate investigation. They say what she would want, more than anything, would be for nobody else to suffer what she went through. Damon Green, ITV News, in Stoke-on-Trent.
Well, our Deputy Political Editor Chris Shipp is in Downing Street. Chris, the Prime Minister is facing more criticism over the NHS, isn't she?
Well, Mary, you need only watch this programme this week to see how the NHS and social care is delivering bad news for the government on an almost daily basis. And it isn't just England missing the targets, all parts of the UK are. If you just take a look at these figures, you can see that Scotland is doing a little bit better than England, Wales a little bit worse, and Northern Ireland quite a lot worse. Despite that, Theresa May doesn't think that more money is the solution. In fact, I had a chat with a source in the Treasury a little while ago who again put me off the idea that there will be a big pot of money in the budget for NHS and social care. Remember, Theresa May said earlier in the year that she thought doctors, GP surgeries were the problem because they were not doing their job properly and pushing more and more people towards A&E. This is what the Prime Minister said earlier at a press conference when we put these latest performance figures to her.
If you look at what has been happening in A&E, in December we had a record number, the busiest day in accident and emergency that took place, that has taken place in the National Health Service. We are now seeing something like nearly 3,000 more people being seen within the 4-hour standard every single day.
Now remember, these official figures are for December, and a lot of the unofficial evidence at the moment for January points to the signs of things being worse. For example, the Royal College of Emergency Medicine says it reckons the target for England for January was as low as 79%, and we'll find out in a month's time if those are matched by the official figures.
Chris Shipp, thank you. The Archbishop of Canterbury today entered a bitter political row over the number of child refugees accepted by the UK. Justin Melby said he was shocked that only 350 were to be given safe haven. The government insists it's doing the right thing, but Labour says it is shameful. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan reports.
For unaccompanied refugee children who have already been kicked from pillar to post, the DUB scheme was a lifeline expected to offer 3,000 of them sanctuary in Britain. Instead, it has been capped at 350. Today, the Home Secretary said that was because councils could take no more and the scheme had had unintended consequences.
That it acts as a draw, it acts as a pull, it encourages the people traffickers.
But her critics now include the Archbishop of Canterbury, who said, "I was saddened and shocked. To end the scheme now when such a small proportion have actually entered the country is regrettable." And at least one local council now says they actually have more places to offer unaccompanied child refugees.
Lewisham Council offered 23 places for Dubs children. These are unaccompanied minors with no connection in the UK. Since that time, the government has not taken up one of those places for any Dubs child.
MPs had expected the scheme to bring in around 3,000 unaccompanied children. So far, only 200 have arrived, with another 150 still to come. So today, opposition MPs were more than usually angry with the Home Secretary.
How does she live with herself, leaving thousands of children subject to disease, people trafficking, squalor and hopelessness?
The Home Office say the most vulnerable refugees are in fact those in the Middle East, thousands of whom are being resettled here. But that's done little to placate MPs who thought several thousand children would be brought here from Europe, only to now find it is in fact going to be several hundred. Carl Dinnan, ITV News, Westminster.
The former Cabinet Minister Michael Gove refused to comment today on claims that Rupert Murdoch sat in on his interview with President Donald Trump. It comes as senior politicians raise concerns with regulators that the Murdoch family are unfit to fully take over Sky. Business editor Joel Hills is here. Joel, why does this matter?
Well, it matters because last month, you may recall, Michael Gove pulled off what looked like a terrific scoop. He secured the first interview with President Trump for a foreign newspaper, The Times, in this question. The two men posed together afterwards in that famous photo. But the FT's reporting that Rupert Murdoch, who owns The Times and is friendly with Trump, was also in the room. Now, ITV News has spoken to Michael Gove. He wouldn't comment, but didn't deny that Rupert Murdoch was there. And the issue here is all about the influence that the Murdoch family has. Tonight, Ofcom, we understand, is considering a request to reassess whether James Murdoch, Rupert's son, is fit to run a broadcasting company. In 2012, it was critical of his conduct, very critical, conducting a review of the phone hacking scandal at the News of the World, but it did not find that he was involved in any wrongdoing. I've seen a letter from Ed Miliband, Sir Vince Cable, Baroness Varsi, urging Ofcom to review that decision in light of the takeover bid by Fox for Sky.
I would be surprised, frankly, and I think it would be a failure of the regulator if they said there's nothing to see here. You see what has happened at the Murdoch empire. That's been revealed in the last 4 years since their original report.
So will Ofcom investigate? It has an obligation to ensure directors are fit and proper ongoing. Note this, it made no objection when James Murdoch was reappointed as chairman of Sky a year ago. Some will conclude that means they don't share Ed Miliband's concerns.
Fascinating. Joel, thanks very much indeed. A motion of no confidence has been tabled against the Commons Speaker, John Bercow. He came under heavy criticism earlier this week after saying he'd ban President Trump from speaking to Parliament. The Conservative MP, James Duddridge, has called for a Commons vote, saying the Speaker's comments were wholly inappropriate. A man accused of murdering a children's author for her money today denied telling his trial a catalogue of lies. Ian Stewart claimed his fiancée, Helen Bailey, had been kidnapped by two mystery men who'd threatened to kill her. From St Albans Crown Court, Richard Pallow reports.
4 days after her disappearance, Helen Bailey apparently called the man she planned to wed and said, "I love you, do everything they say." Ian Stewart alleges she was being held in an unknown location by two men called Nick and Joe, who made repeated visits to the house to beat him up and threaten her life. He recalled how Nick spun me around and put his arm around my neck and said, "I don't think you understand how serious this is. If you tell the police or anyone, you won't see Helen again." He said this is what happened to Helen. He said they demanded £500,000, also to prevent his sons, Oliver and Jamie, ending up in hospital, but never mentioned any of this to police until 5 months after he was charged with murder. Prosecutor Stuart Trimmer QC said, "You are without doubt a complete liar." Stuart answered no. Trimmer went on to say, "This is a long-crafted, cynical and cruel plan of yours. We can't know how you did it, but I'm going to suggest you smothered her while she was asleep." The prosecution say that in the weeks before her body was buried in a cesspit under their house, Stewart repeatedly put the sedative Zopiclone into her scrambled eggs, drugging her again on the morning of her disappearance. They also say he planned to kill her 3 days earlier, but his parents appeared unexpectedly. Mr. Stewart claimed that he did not know that Miss Bailey's life insurance policy made him the beneficiary, saying he signed it just as a witness. But the court was shown how the same document clearly stated that should his fiancée die before they were married, and only before, then he would get £1.28 million. He also stood to inherit more from the author's estate, but denies murdering the woman he was set to spend his life with. Richard Pallo, ITV News at St Albans Crown Court.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News. Could Scotland become the first part of the UK to introduce a plastic bottle tax? And a nose for survival. The farmer who kept his head above water just for 8 hours. Those stories and more after the break. Join me then. And welcome back. Those of a certain age may remember getting money back for returning empty pop bottles to the corner shop. A similar scheme looks set to return in Scotland in a bid to tackle its litter problem. And like the public smoking ban and the plastic bag charge, if successful, it could spread across the UK. Here's our Scotland correspondent, Peter Smith.
When a plastic bottle is thrown away, it doesn't just disappear. It sticks around to spoil beauty spots, harm wildlife and pollute the oceans. Jenny Hume is leading a campaign to have a deposit return system where you would pay an extra 10p for your plastic bottle or a can, which you would then redeem when you took it back for recycling. In just 30 seconds on this beach in South Queensferry, this is what we found.
We've seen evidence from 37 countries or regions around the world where it's running successfully, and they have a much higher recycling rate than we do here at the moment.
The Scottish Government is now holding a consultation on this deposit idea. It was Scotland that went first in Britain on the smoking ban though, and Wales pioneered the charges for plastic bags. So paying deposits on bottles is something we could all be doing soon, if it works. In the UK we use almost 36 million plastic bottles every day, but we fail to recycle 16 million of them. That's almost half. Those bottles end up in landfill or as litter, where they can take as long as 500 years to break down. Those that are recycled end up in a place like this.
Those who are behind this idea say we should stop looking at plastic bottles like this as waste and start realising that this is a valuable asset. 1 tonne of these plastic bottles would be sold today for about £120.
Companies like Changeworks in Edinburgh have built their business on this.
The plastic is out there, it's already been turned into plastic. It's a lot easier to turn that back into plastic again than to have to go and take raw materials and start from scratch. So by reusing and recycling, we can help save the natural resources on the earth.
So many plastic drinks containers like these were found last year, they could have been lined up along Scotland's coastline, 1 every 3 metres. If there's an incentive instead to line your pocket, we might just see less of this being left behind for others to profit. Peter Smith, ITV News, Edinburgh.
22 children have been taken to hospital after a school bus overturned and crashed down an embankment. It happened during this morning's rush hour in North Lanarkshire. Police say no one is seriously injured. And an independent report has found that the collapse of a wall at a school in Edinburgh was due to poor construction work. 17 schools were forced to close because of concerns over safety. The Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, has announced she is to retire. The singer of such legendary hits as Respect and Natural Woman says she wants to spend more time with her grandchildren. But she's not going to leave her fans empty-handed, as our arts editor Nina Nana reports.
After 6 decades in the spotlight and millions of record sales, Aretha Franklin was invited to do a telephone interview with her local TV station in Detroit to discuss her latest album. But the Queen of Soul had another announcement to make.
I must tell you, I am retiring this year.
Are you serious?
And, yes, I'm serious. This will be my last year. So I feel very, very enriched and satisfied with respect to where my career came from and where it is now.
It's not quite total freedom yet. There will be one more album produced by Stevie Wonder later this year. One of the most influential and revered voices in music, Franklin sung at President Obama's inauguration and then sang again and made him cry. Her track record has simply been astounding. Little wonder other stars have queued to perform with her. But after some years of illness, Franklin says she now wants to spend time with her grandchildren before they head off to college. She'll still perform a little, she says, but who could deny a rest to the woman who soundtracked our generation? Nina Nanar, ITV News.
Finally tonight, trapped for hours in a muddy pond with your nose barely above the water sounds like something out of a horror film, doesn't it? But that is exactly what happened to an Australian man when his digger rolled into a waterhole. Rebecca Barry has his incredible story.
Imagine this, stuck in a muddy bog right up to your nose, pinned down by a 3-ton digger truck, unable to move and only just able to breathe.
Didn't have time to jump clear. I hit the water, went under. The next thing I feel is the roll bar come across my back and I'm completely underwater.
As the minutes turned to hours, Daniel tried to dig his way out, but the truck started to sink further, dragging him down with it. It was 5 hours before help eventually arrived. Firefighters drained the bog and dragged Daniel free. Muddy, but lucky to be alive.
To be face down in the mud was such a joy.
He'd feared his family would find his body.
They're going to find me face down in a dam, dead. So that wasn't going to happen. Well, not without a fight. And then I just screamed, help, 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 help.
Finally, he saw his neighbour approaching.
I felt more sorry for her than myself. The look on her face was just terror.
Daniel escaped with minor back injuries and hypothermia.
I made it, you know. I was sitting there, I was determined to make it.
But no doubt, this will haunt his nightmares forever. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
And that is all for now. Tom Bradby is here with news at 10, but from me and all the team here, have a great evening. Bye-bye.